It's Sunday night, and we're teaching on the doctrine of the devil. The doctrine of the devil is very subversive. It's a counterfeit doctrine, and I believe it's got the world in a stranglehold. The doctrine of the devil, the Bible says, in the latter times, this is talking about the end of time, some shall depart from the faith. It's not talking about everybody departing from faith, but some shall depart from faith, and they'll give heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils. Of course, that word devil there in 1 Timothy 4:1 is the word daimonion. It's our word demon. And there's no such thing as demons. Whatever a demon is the meaning of this word. And that word comes from the word daimon, D-A-I-M-O-N. And that word daimon is from the root dio, meaning to distribute fortunes. Now, fortunes is not merely money. It is money, but it's power. It is applause. It is goods. It is lands. It is houses. It is anything that fulfills a man's flesh and fulfills his desires for the things that are unlawful. And when you distribute fortunes, you're just fulfilling self. That's all. Now, the way men fulfill self is they do something, they use guile. Guile means to speak by trickery or to live by trickery. Trickery, that's the word dolos in the Greek. And Jesus said we're not to have guile in our lives. We're to say, let our yea be yea, our nay, nay. And we're not to be using trickery or trying to divert people away from the real truth. Look straight in the eye, tell the truth, even if it hurts, even if it implicates you in a situation that you don't like to be blamed for. Go ahead and tell the truth. You're going to be found out anyway. Be sure your sins will find you out. Now, I believe that America is being deceived. And I've said this, I believe that America is brainwashed in every area of our lives. I believe we're being brainwashed. I know we're being brainwashed by the preachers. If you're going to get somebody to give you money, you have to flatter them and make them feel good about you. You have to make them think that you really love them so much, and you go far beyond anything that's rational or reasonable, and you stroke them, and you just pet them, and you pat them, and you do this with words or whatever you have to do. I call it priming the pump. I was in the music business. In the music business, whenever a man comes along and he's a con artist, he primes the pump. Priming the pump is what we used to do on my grandfather's farm outside of Fort Worth, west of Fort Worth. And he'd have an old pump out there, and the pump would go down into a well. And if you wanted to get water out of that well, you couldn't get water out of it unless you poured water into the pump. You poured water into the pump, and you're priming it. And once you get it going, then the other water shoots out. And that's what men do. They will pour all of this adulation over you and give you applause, tell you how wonderful you are, until you get to believing it, going, oh, man, this guy loves me, and he's going to do everything in the world for me. That's the way a con man does. The way a con man does, he strokes you. You know what I mean by stroke. You just constantly are telling people how wonderful they are. You're stroking them. Tell them how God's got great things for them. That's what the Pentecostals, Charismatics do. And you just keep stroking them till they say, man, I must be wonderful. I'm going to give this guy whatever I've got. That's the way you do that. And it's always soft words. It's syrupy words. When somebody starts, I love it when somebody tells me they love me and they love the message. But when somebody comes in here and starts stroking me, and after every service they get up here and pour honey all over my head like I'm just the sweetest thing. You're so wonderful. You're the greatest thing. But they never mention the Word of God. They're stroking me. If they'll say, hey, I love that message on so-and-so. But I can tell when somebody's just stroking me. And wherever they are, I don't like that. You have to flatter people. That's what they do. Now, the reason men do this is to get either money or position. Politicians will tell you anything to get elected. There's money and power in it. They'll go out and smile when there's no reason to smile. They wouldn't smile if they weren't running for office. It's just, hi, how are you, sir? It's really good to see you. And how are you, ma'am? You know that they're putting on, trying to get your vote, trying to get your money. You say, what's wrong with that, Jim? People will, what they do is they twist things. They twist their own attitude. They twist words. And that's called what the Bible calls froward. And this is the doctrine of the devil. You cannot preach the devil's doctrine, and you cannot preach the devil's doctrine and leave the truth completely behind. The only way you can deceive somebody is to have part truth and part lie. When you have a glass of tea or a glass of Coke, and half of it is Coke and half of it is strychnine, what do you have? You have a 100% poison elixir. When you have half truth and half lie, you have a whole lie. And that's the only way you can deceive. You've got to have a Jesus in it. If you're going to preach false doctrine, it's got to have a Jesus. Notice I didn't say the Jesus. It has to have a Jesus. And Paul says there's two Jesus in the Bible. There is the Jesus of the Bible that says take your cross and die daily. He says death to self. Death to self. He says self-denial. He says be hated by the world. If the world hated me, it'll hate you. Hated by the world. He says obey God and be persecuted for it. And he says you're blessed when you're persecuted. And he says you have to go through tribulation and trials. Now that's the real Jesus. The other Jesus says no. Another Jesus says no. God wants you to have money and stuff and things and go to church and have all this. And he wants you to be happy, and he don't want anything bad to happen to you. And he just wants your life to be great. And that's the other Jesus. You cannot preach the devil's doctrine and deceive somebody by completely leaving all the terminology of the Bible behind and going out here and coming up with the doorknob is our God. Doorknob is our God. And we believe that you have to go down to the dump every day and take some trash. And that's one of the rituals of that. You can't get into something that ridiculous. You can't leave the truth totally and deceive. You've got to have some truth in order to deceive. How are you going to deceive somebody unless you look like the real thing? That's called a counterfeit. So what men are doing to make headway in every phase of our society, they are twisting everything. The preachers are twisting the Word of God. The lawyers are twisting truth so they can... a lot of lawyers don't care. I'm not saying every lawyer, but a great majority of lawyers don't care whether you're right or wrong. When you watch defending attorneys on one of these investigative shows, always their people are innocent when they're as guilty as sin, and I can see it. No, he's innocent. No, I know he had 50 people testify against him, saw him with a gun in his hand, with a hole in his wife's head. But what really actually happened was something else. That was their imagination. Well, no. What these guys do, they're doing it for money. They will defend, some of them will defend for money regardless. And what men are doing whenever they twist anything, if you twist your wife's words or your husband's words, you're doing it to get by with something. You're doing it for a reason to put you ahead in some fashion or some way. And we've all been guilty of that. Have to learn not to do that. I have learned. What used to make me nervous when Mary had asked me, did you do this? And I had forgotten to do it. Instead of making an excuse, I've said, no, I didn't. I'll go do it now. That's the best thing to do, isn't it? Instead of, well, here's what happened. I got caught up with this or that. And excuse. You say, I forgot. I'll go get it. She'll say, did you pick up my medicine at the store? I forgot. I'll go right now. And I'll walk out the door and go get it. That's the best thing instead of, But it's guile to make excuse. That's what it is. That's what men do. In a small way, when you make excuse to your wife, your husband, that's the same thing. Or make excuse to a friend. That's a type of guile, and we don't need to use it in any fashion because we're wanting to get something out of it, ease our mind, ease our responsibility. Just like these guys that's trying to preach for money, they're wanting to get something out of it. We need to put aside all guile. Everything's being twisted. Our history is twisted. History teachers twist. Professors in college twist. Doctors twist. Lawyers twist. We live in a twisted society, a froward society, a perverted society. I believe it is just literally taken over the world. Perverted society. We're perverted in America. Everywhere you turn. People won't be bluntly honest with one another. I've got a paper. I've been doing some research on mass mind control. And I'm going to read something out of this. The title of this is Mass Mind Control, and I took it off the internet. I want to read some stuff out of this to you. From the moment our senses first registers the presence of our parents, we're being shown the way that life apparently is. Though through no fault of ours or theirs, our parents begin the programming process as their views of life, shaped by their education, employment, and media, are imposed upon us. Whatever your parents was, that's what they're going to encourage you to be. If they were twisted, they're going to encourage the twisting in your life, and the whole nation is twisted. Formal education through schools, colleges, universities continues the systematic indoctrination where the correct views and interpretations of science, history, and society result in exam passes and the ability to get on in life. Alternative views and rejection of establishment education lead to supposedly lesser jobs and a struggle against economic poverty. Our entire understanding of the world and current affairs is filtered through mass media. All these talking heads on TV. It's all filtered through that. And as I said earlier, if you want to get to somebody, you repeat something over and over and over, year after year after year. And as the years go by, you twist it just a little to appease the American public. There's many things that we're not being told through the mass media that they do not want us to know because it would cause a national panic. Interpreted by journalists and so-called experts. Their views become our views simply because we are not offered any alternatives, and they hammer away at us every day over and over. Our experience of life is determined by the framework around our society. The basic premise is that the goal of each individual should be to become a minute part in the global machine of consumerism led by Western multinational corporations and banks. What they want is you just to be that little cog that you're supposed to be and sit there and don't make any noise, don't squeak, where we have to put some oil on you. Just be in that little place and submit to the machinery, the national machinery. The vast majority of the world's population are merely sheep happily following the herd, regardless of who's leading. Whatever is broadcast in the media is being desirable to the masses suddenly and miraculously becomes desired by the masses. When you show, somebody watches these soap operas and you see some woman and she's gorgeous and beautiful and he's real handsome and they're in a sports car and they're riding up this road into the Alps and they've got this chalet up there and they're living in luxury and posh opulence, and they have this great lifestyle and money and things and diamonds, and they're drinking cocktails in these country clubs, and they show everything is happy and hunky-dory, and nobody's unhappy, and they don't show the drunkenness behind the scenes and the lying and cheating and stealing and thieving. People get to thinking that's real, and it's not. And they get to thinking, I want that, and so they get completely off track in life. Whatever our neighbor owns or achieves becomes the object of great envy. I've seen that in my family. One person gets a diamond ring, we're getting a bigger one next year. One person gets a 18-foot boat, we're buying a 20-foot next year. Becomes an object of great envy, and we lust to acquire what we believe to be ours by our right. Thus, when we are shown a solution to a problem, any old solution to anything which interferes with our need to follow the latest trends, we accept it without question and cease to seek any further for ourselves. And just like sheep who follow blindly and without question the direction of the herd, we are led through the gates of a pen to be confined at the shepherd's convenience until it is time for the final journey, once again without hesitation and happy in the knowledge that we are with the in crowd through the gates of the slaughterhouse. And that's where America's going, through the gates of the slaughterhouse. And we're being slaughtered because of what men want. If you think our leaders in this nation are out for you, you are really mistaken. They are out for self and power and money and position. There seems to be just enough citizens who are choosing to remain asleep. This is no accident. This is carefully crafted by design to drive to dumb down the population of planet Earth. Is a classic art that existed before the United States did. The dumbing down of America is an official term among sociologists. To keep most of the people dumb in the world, they call it dumbing down. I've got a book called Dumbing Down of America. One component to understanding and deciphering the systems of control is to become a student of magicians, of influence and propaganda. He's talking about all these people that manipulate the public, like the talking heads, like the commentators, like the anchor men. Do you know the only reason we did not collapse during this last recession is because of all of these anchor men on TV and all these commentators? If we'd have had TV and all these commentators, they could have talked the world in 1929 into believing everything's okay and just kept on getting further and further in debt instead of having a crash. We're so sophisticated now we can keep the crash from coming with our manipulation of the American public. It's no accident. This dumbing down the population of the earth is a classic art that existed before the U.S. did. One component to understanding and deciphering the systems of control is to become a student of magicians, of influence and propaganda. That's talking about everybody from anchormen to our politicians. In order to defeat our enemies, it's imperative that we understand how they think and what they believe in. Let me just give you this and then I'll get on with my lesson. When people think about mind control, they usually think in terms of classic conspiracy theory that refers to Project MKUltra. This program is a proven example of overt mind control. The project has grown out of an earlier secret program known as Bluebird that was officially formed to counter Soviet advances in brainwashing. In reality, the CIA had other objectives. An earlier aim was to study methods through which control of an individual may be attained. The emphasis of experimentation was narco-hypnosis, the blending of the mind-altering drugs with carefully hypnotic programming. I believe America's under that influence. A crack CIA team was formed that could travel at a moment's notice to anywhere in the world. Their task was to test the new interrogation techniques and ensure that victims would not remember being interrogated and programmed. I don't believe America even knows they're being programmed. It is so subtle. This is a part of the apostasy. All manner of narcotics, from marijuana to LSD, heroin, and sodium pentothal, the so-called truth drug, were regularly used with little or no thought to personal safety or need for those who may need it afterwards. And he goes into a lot of CIA things. What I'm going to do is come back and read on this. I want to get, and I'm just going to read some on what these people, you can go online and look up, Google mind control, mass mind control, and there's a lot of interesting things on it. I believe America is in a state of mass mind control. This is not the America of 1950, is it, Ken? This is like, it's like we're on Mars compared to 1950. It's like it's another planet compared to then, isn't it? It's the most insane thing I've ever seen happen in 50 years, 60 years. You've heard me say this, and I'm going to bring in a lot in this series on Doctrine of the Devil. You've heard me tell you about the incident that happened. And I was thinking about this afternoon. I can remember the classroom. I can remember in college being in a classroom. I can't remember anything else, but this shocked me so bad. I can remember the professor's face. I can remember the day. I can see the class around me, but I can never remember any other day except that day because of what he said. Walked into the class and he said, it was an American history class in college, and he said, I am not allowed to tell you the truth about American history in 1957. I was entering Texas A&M in the fall of 1957. He said, they won't let me tell you the truth about American history. I'll give you answers. You give them back to me. And when he said that, I can't remember any other class except that day, but I can see him saying it. It nearly knocked me out of my chair at 18 years old. I go, what in the world is he talking about? And then I began to read about it. I'm bringing this out because this has to do with our spiritual condition in America. They have sold us a bill of goods on George Washington, on Ben Franklin, on Thomas Jefferson. They were not Christians. They said themselves they were deists. A deist is one who believes in a deity, and that's all. They believe that God spun all this universe out here and put our solar system out here, and all the planets going around the sun, all these other, and the Milky Way out here, and then God walked away and said, okay, y'all take care of it. He's from the South. He said, y'all. I'm going to read to you. Sometimes I wonder, how can I get these things in? This is a part of how we're being lied to and fooled. I was buying some clothes. I was buying a shirt or two down at Dillard's about 3 years ago. And the guy waiting on me, I said, how long have you been working at Dillard's? He said, oh, I've been here a couple of years. I was a history teacher in high school down in Nashville for 30 years. I said, then you know the truth about Thomas Jefferson. Oh, yes, but you know. And he started making excuse. Jefferson was a heathen. He rewrote the Bible. He said Revelation was ravings of a maniac. He didn't believe the Bible. He didn't hardly believe anything spiritually. And he threw out all the Old Testament, everything from Acts through Revelation, kept the Gospels, took a razor blade and cut out all references to the virgin birth, to the resurrection and miracles, said he didn't believe in any of that. Thomas Jefferson went to hell. He was a very strange man. Every generation, I've got an old-time magazine that I have somewhere at the house. I've got a stack of Time magazines. And in one of the magazines, it said, even during George Bush's administration, one of the historians was talking to Bush or in a meeting with him, and said that every generation has someone who wants to bring down Jefferson because he wasn't at all what he appeared to be. Even his own generation didn't like him. I'm going to read to you something out of this. This is Legends, Lies, and I'm bringing this out. If you think this doesn't have to do with our spirituality, it does. The reason these politicians and teachers have painted these guys into some corner that they are not is so that somebody can make some headway or get position in life. That's why William Jefferson Clinton would say, I was named after Thomas Jefferson. Well, that's not a good thing to be named after, because the man was a heathen. He was a liar. Let me read. I'm going to read a little bit to you here out of this book, Cherished Lies and Myths of American History. Legends, Lies, Cherished Myths of American History. This shows you how we're being fooled about everything. This is by Richard Shankman, graduate of Harvard, Research for the Library of Congress. Once in a while you'll see him on Larry King. Larry King doesn't read any of the books of the people that come on that he interviews because he likes spontaneity. He wants a spontaneous reaction, his own spontaneity and theirs. If he read Mr. Schenkman's books, he probably wouldn't have him on there. Let me read to you here what he says about democracy. More troubling may be the well-nigh universal attitude among founders toward democracy. Historian Charles Beard writes that most of the drafters of the Constitution viewed democracy as something rather to be dreaded than encouraged. These are the drafters of the Constitution. Well into the 19th century, he insists, into the 19th century, the 1800s, he insists the word democracy was repeatedly used by conservatives to smear opponents of all kinds. They didn't call themselves a democracy, and we're not a democracy. We're a republic. A republic is ruled by those who are entitled to vote, and you had to be rich in early America to vote. You had to own property at one time back in the 40s to vote, and now they're getting it down where they can call everybody to vote or to serve on a jury. Even so stout a defender of people's rights as Jefferson never publicly identified himself as a Democrat. Throughout his long life, he preferred to call himself a Republican. He used that term even after many of his own supporters had begun to call themselves Democrats. So controversial was the word Democrat that it does not appear in any of the famous documents associated with the birth of the country, not in the Declaration of Independence, the U.S. Constitution, or any state constitutions. The chief objection to the word was that its association with the Cromwellian Revolution in England, where Oliver Cromwell dethroned the king and the queen, where they wouldn't rule and Parliament only ruled, where it was used by conservatives to stigmatize political action by the rabble. Among prominent 18th century Americans, only Anne Hutchinson and Roger Williams, both self-professed radicals, seemed willing to use the word positively. The founders believed in equality. Listen to this. This is how we've twisted everything. We look at the Constitution. Do people actually believe? Do they actually believe that it takes these Supreme Court judges 3 or 4 years to figure out what the Founding Fathers meant in a document that it took them 3 days to draw up? That's ridiculous. They didn't really mean much of anything. Listen, the founders believed inequality is no more true than they believed in democracy. The Declaration of Independence may say it, but the founders didn't believe all men are created equal. They apparently believed all men are created equal in the eyes of the law, but not in their eyes. And that was all. They did not believe men are socially or economically equal, didn't believe they should be. As a colonial historian, Jack Green, puts it, no idea was further from their minds. When they talked about equality in a social or economic sense, they meant no more than that each man should have equal right to achieve the best material life he could within the limits imposed on him. If you're black, just within your limits. That's it. If you're an American Indian, just in your limits. Don't think you're going to rise up where we are by his ability or means or circumstance. Put another way, the All-American founders did not believe in an all-American concept that any American boy could grow up to be president. Another myth about the founders. But where did this all come from? The politicians and the teachers want to make everything look wonderful and hunky-dory, so they write these things and make these speeches and say, our founding forefathers were a half step below the apostles, and they were godly and wonderful. They were not. They were a bunch of crooks, like we got today. Another myth about the founders is that they have always been revered. Everybody looked up to Thomas Jefferson. That's not true. They didn't look up to George Washington when he was here. They looked at him like they do presidents today. In truth, some of those now considered most important have only recently been elevated to the National Hall of Fame. 60 years ago, 60 years from when he wrote this book in the 90s. 60 years ago, Jefferson was still regarded with suspicion or with indifference by Americans before they built the Tidewater Basin with the Jefferson Memorial. That's what entrenched him in the American eye. Theodore Cooper, organizing a national campaign to preserve Monticello, Jefferson's home, he discovered that he had trouble raising money needed to just make a $100,000 down payment on the property. We also found Cooper reported that the textbook passed over Jefferson by mere mention of his presidency and his signing the Declaration, and even second-hand bookshops were surprised when anybody inquired for a book on Jefferson. That was up to 60 years before he wrote this. Let me give you this. Paul Revere wrote into the hero spotlight only in 1863 when Henry Wadsworth Longfellow wrote his famous poem about him. Otherwise, we would have never heard of Paul Revere. Rescuing Revere from virtual obscurity. Historians say before the poem, many Americans were not even familiar with Revere's name. In the early 19th century, not a single editor included Revere in any compendium of American worthies, and Revere did not rate a mention in William Allen's Comprehensive Biological Dictionary. And one of his books, this book by Schenkman, is I Love Paul Revere, whether he wrote or not. This book has things in it that did not happen, sayings that did not happen. Nathan Hale did not say, I regret that I have one life to give for my country. He didn't say that. Patrick Henry did not say, give me liberty or give me death. Their publicists put it in a publication to make them look good. You say, what are you doing? The whole nation, everything, everywhere is polluted. It's twisted. We can't tell the truth about our presidents because so many of them were crooked. We had a homosexual living in the White House, James Buchanan. He had his boyfriend living with him in the White House in the mid-1800s, and they called his girlfriend, Miss Fancy. That's what Congress called her. Slept in a bed with him in the White House. Great day. They said he was smart. Well, okay. Which I don't care if they had a homosexual in the White House, but why don't they say it? I could care less. Because that's Babylon anyway, isn't it? Good grief. Washington was regarded as an American hero in his own lifetime, of course, but until relatively recently, he was also the target of sharp attacks. In his own day, he was roughly savaged by editors who frequently treated him with utter contempt. From Philadelphia, Aurora, published by Ben Franklin's grandson, came this cavil. If ever a nation was debauched by a man, the American nation has been by Washington. When he died, the paper rejoiced. This is what they said. Every heart in unison with freedom and happiness of the people ought to beat high in exultation at the death of Washington. George Washington was a surveyor. He surveyed 10,000 acres of Indian land off to himself. He was the richest man in America in his lifetime because he stole Indian land. Why do we say it? I'll read it a little more on this next page, and then I'll get some more twisting in our society. It's just, we're perverted. This is what this professor meant when I went to that class. And I kept that in the back of my mind until I found some information on it. And you can watch, once in a while, you'll see Richard Schenkman on C-SPAN. And he's this real calm, quiet, nice-looking guy, a little younger than me. It's like, he said that he wants to say these things so he can bring these guys down to the level of the average man. Well, they are the average man. Most of them are lower than the average man because they were just as corrupt as the politicians today. Especially dear to the right-wing crowd is the belief that the founding fathers were devout churchgoers. Compared with the modern-day politicians, they perhaps were. But there's not much evidence they were regular worshipers. Through most of his presidency, Washington did not go to church except on special occasions. Neither Jefferson nor Franklin regularly went to church either. John Adams did. Alexander Hamilton, during most of his life, did not, and he said he was a Christian. Claims that the founding fathers were particularly religious are plainly false. Where did he get this information? Library of Congress, researcher. While virtually all believed in the divinity of Christ, most remained somewhat skeptical of religion and usually referred ambiguously in correspondence to providence rather than to Christ himself or God. Debunker Rupert Hughes reports that in political matters, Washington went out of his way to avoid invoking the authority of Christ. In his dying hours, Washington, a self-styled deist, he said he was a deist. He did not claim Christianity. He was raised an Episcopalian. His mother was Mary Ball, and he was terrified of his mother. Of course, they ain't going to tell anybody that, are they? He was 6'5" at his peak. And the reason he became leader of our Revolutionary Army, Shinkman says, is he showed up, the only man that showed up with a uniform. That's a good reason to put a man in charge, isn't it? He never mentioned religion in his dying hours. He left no money for religious causes in his will. Now, like this, Franklin is said to have believed in the divinity of Christ, but he also reported to have thought that there might be other gods as well. There might be other divinities. He apparently believed strongly in an afterlife. When his brother John died in 1756, Franklin told grieving relatives not to be too anxious, since all he would eventually be rejoined in some kind of heaven. Why should you and I be grieved at this? Jefferson, oddly enough, was probably more religious than Washington. I don't know what that means. But remained iconoclastic to the end. He was a regular Bible reader, publicly announced that he was a Christian, and even wrote a little book on the morals of Christ, and it's called Jefferson's Bible, where he left out Acts through Revelation and threw away the Old Testament. But he also thought Christ's statements were defective, because when he was crucified, he hadn't yet reached his peak development as a thinker. Is that outrageous? Hamilton poses special problems. He was religious at the beginning of his life and at the end, but not in the middle. I don't even know what that means. I just thought I'd read some of that. That just shows you how twisted our history is. I'm going to read some more out of that in this series. People need to know the truth, don't we? Do you think that does not affect the religious life in America? If you're given Washington or Jefferson as an example, then what kind of example does it set for you when you find out the truth? It's like having a preacher, for example, and then you find out he's lying and he doesn't know anything about God or the Word or the Bible. Outrageous, isn't it? Let me check something 1 second. Oops. My battery's going out, Mike.
It's fine.
Is it? Okay. Okay. All right. Now, let me get to another area of this. I believe the whole nation is twisted. I believe that it's affecting the believers at Grace and Truth Ministries. You know how it's affecting them? It's getting in their eyes and their ears, and it's making them weary and getting them tired, and they just feel like not being committed to the truth, and they come some and not all the time. They give a little, not very much. It's like this, I believe, and I don't even blame the people. I believe this world is wearing out the people of God. That's what I believe is happening. I believe they're getting tired. They get wore out. They get tired of fighting the battle. It takes special perseverance to fight this battle. And the only way you're going to learn to persevere is to, it's the same thing when you want to become, if you want to become an engineer, you want to become do some kind of work, specialty work, you got to get down, buckle down, and study. The more you stuff into your head, the more information you get in your mind, the more you do work for God, the more this book you read, the easier it becomes through the years. It's easier for me to read something and understand it now than it was when I first started. When I first started reading the Bible at 16, 17 years old in 1956, I didn't have any idea where I was going and what I was doing, but I had to force myself Sometimes I had a hard time forcing myself. But once you get a big piece of the puzzle put together, finding the pieces is a lot easier than finding those first two pieces, isn't it? I want to encourage you to buckle down and make yourself do what you need to do. I keep telling people, read your Bible. I've got a library, a magnificent library. 85 to 90% of my time is in this book, not my library. You got to stay in the book. Learn the timelines. When I start off with Adam, I say Adam is over here. And then he had a son, Seth. And Seth had a son, Enosh, down to Canaan, Mahalalel, and all these guys. I can name these guys all day long, and we go through the timeline of Israel. And then we go into the prophets. Learn these people. That's when it gets real interesting, doesn't it? When you learn a lot about something, it gets interesting. Now, we're talking about these preachers. Preachers have twisted the Word of God. I've gone through it. I've gone through, there's no sinner's prayer, but they make a sinner's prayer by yanking a verse out. They show over there in Luke 18, they show this publican, and they show this Pharisee, and the Pharisee says, I thank you, God, I'm not as other men are. I'm not as this lowly publican here. He's a tax collector for Rome, and he puts all this exorbitant taxes upon the people, and he steals from the people. I thank you I'm not like him. I fast twice a week. I give tithes of all that I have, and I'm one of the good guys. The publican smote his breast and said, God be merciful to me, a sinner. So people say, see, he prayed the sinner's prayer, said, God be merciful. That must be what saved him because the Bible says, and they tie it immediately with Romans 10:13. For whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. And the publican said, God be merciful. So that's what saved him. That's not what saved the publican. Smoting his breast. They pull it out of context. You have to keep it in context with Acts 16. When the Philippian jailer comes to Paul and Silas and asks, the only time it's asked in the Bible, the only time, the perennial question that everyone asks, what must I do to be saved? Boy, that's a great question, isn't it? And what did Paul say? Accept Christ as your Savior. Pray a sinner's prayer. Would you like to let Jesus come into your heart? He said, believe on the Lord Jesus Christ, and thou shalt be saved. But I keep saying, believe means obedience, because believe is the verb, faith is the noun. You have a noun in a verb form. Faith is pistis, believe is pistuo. Let me write it up here again. Faith, that's the noun, pistis. Believe. Well, that used to confuse me. What is faith? What does it mean? Did it ever confuse you when you was younger? How do you have faith? You ever try to have faith? You hear those guys say, have faith. Release your faith. Faith is death to self. It's obedience to God. Verb, that's believe. P-I-S-T-E-U-O. Faith cometh by hearing, hear, and obey the same word. So believing is hearing, or it's obeying. Obey and hear are your same word. So if you have faith and you believe, you're obedient to what you believe. If you believe something, you do it. Don't you? If you believe that if you jump off of a building, you're going to get crushed down there, you don't jump off of a building. You believe that. You believe in gravity, don't you? You don't say, I don't think I believe in gravity today. I'm going to jump out here and fly. You better not, because your days are over. Now, people will twist this word, and they'll use the publican in Romans 10:13. See, he called, and it says, whosoever shall call. But it goes on to say, how shall they call on him in whom they've not believed in Romans 10:14. Belief is the method of salvation. Therefore, the publican, when he said, God be merciful to me, a sinner, he had already believed, hadn't he? He had to have already believed, because believing is the method of salvation, and you can't call on a God you don't believe in. Right? So they yank it out and say, it's real easy. Just pray this prayer and you're home free. Mary's got a cousin who owned a plumbing company here in Hendersonville. Well, a distant relative. And I saw him down at a market one day, back 12, 14 years ago. He said, well, he's very wealthy. Great big super lake home, fancy cars of all kinds. And well, I got saved the other night. Now I got everything, got my lake home, got all my houses, my cars, and my stuff. I don't have to pray anymore and ask God for anything. I thought, you fool. You don't know what prayer is. You don't even know what saved is. You didn't get saved. I don't have to ask God for anything anymore. I walked down the aisle at the big Baptist church and got saved. I don't have to pray no more. I fixed up my eternal life. Let's go have a drink. Thou fool. It's not thy soul is required of thee. They've twisted the word of God. They've perverted it to no end. I have given you the Pentecostals. They use the verse over in the 54th chapter of Isaiah. Let me show you this. I've given it to you before, but I want to make it real clear. And they yank these things out. And remember what I said, they make you feel good by the things they say. Look at Isaiah. I'm going to put a lot of twisting that's going on in our society in this series. From history, to mind control, to preachers, to lawyers, to doctors, wherever I can find it. And it's everywhere in our society. Look over here in Isaiah. Now the Charismatics want to make people feel good, and they feed them this verse as though they're saying, you're a winner, and you're going to be a winner, and you're supposed to be a winner, and nothing ever going to hurt you, and you're home free. And if somebody will tell you that you're home free, that if you believe their charismatic doctrine, and you be positive, and you say positive things, that you're not going to lose. And they use this verse to say you don't ever have to be a loser, that you can win, and you can believe God, and nothing will ever hurt you. They actually believe that you can get to that point. You can believe God so much, nothing will ever harm you. And they use this verse and yank it out and twist it. And if somebody could tell you, if you're very naive and you didn't know this in life, with all the problems that all of us have had, and somebody could just get up here and say, you're wonderful, Ned, you're a great guy, and nothing is ever going to hurt you. All you have to do is believe God and believe this doctrine I'm preaching. Won't that be wonderful? You'll never hurt again and you'll never worry again. Wouldn't that be great? It would be, wouldn't it? You don't have to fight your bosses anymore. Everything's going to be great. That'd be good, wouldn't it? And then they take some naive person that's uneducated, and they stroke them and stroke them and stroke them, and they give them this verse here. This is a famous charismatic used verse. It's not a charismatic verse, it's a charismatic used verse. And they'll say, verse 17, chapter 54. Ha, 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 no weapon formed against you shall prosper. See, God wants you to win. Now I want you to notice something. No weapon formed against you will prosper, and every tongue that shall rise against thee in judgment thou shalt condemn. This is the heritage of the servants of the Lord, and their righteousness is of me, saith the Lord. If you have a King James Interlinear Bible, right out at the edge, it's got the date of this. It's approximately 712 BC. This is approximately where this is written. 712 BC. Now they read that and say, no weapon formed against you will prosper against you. That's not what it says. It says the weapon will not prosper. The weapon will not salak. T-S-A-L-A-C-H. It will not push forward. That's the word prosper. It will not continue. Now over here now remember when Israel went after Baal in the grove for 500 years, and God has Assyria come in and carry northern Israel away in 722 BC. Remember that? 722 BC, northern Israel is slaughtered and butchered and carried away. North Israel is carried away by the Assyrians. Well, this is in 712 BC, where he's talking to Judah, where he's talking to Israel and Judah, saying, no weapon formed against you will prosper. It's talking about the weapon continuing and going forward, and Assyria didn't prosper. The weapon was Assyria. God raises up evil men as a sword to cut us down. Was Israel cut down by the sword in 722? They were slaughtered in the 18th chapter of 2 Kings, 17th, 18th chapter of 2 Kings. They were butchered. They were carried away captive. They were millions dead. It doesn't mean you're not going to be hurt by the sword. It means God's going to use the sword to cut you down. And then he destroyed the Assyrians, and they were overthrown in 605 by the Babylonians. And then in 586 BC, he raises up the Babylonians to carry southern Judah away, and they kill the people, killed hundreds of thousands of them in Jerusalem, carry them away naked into Babylon. Well, does that look like God's not going to hurt Israel? That's outrageous, isn't it? To say this means, and they yank this verse out, just pull it out of the Old Testament and say, you're going to be a winner. Nothing will ever get you down. It's idiocy. Look at the dates. Does it look like it's not talking about it won't prosper against you? It will do the work that I raise it up to do against you, and then I'll crush it. That's what he means. It's amazing what they do with the Bible. It's like Exodus, the 15th chapter. Exodus 15. They pull any portion of a verse out and just wrench it all to pieces. Exodus 15. This is a favorite verse. This is one of Benny Hinn's favorite verses. Everything's going to be positive. Set with your mouth, say positive things, and you're going to get it. And he yanks out a section of this verse in verse 26 of Exodus 15. And he doesn't read the whole verse. I'll read the whole verse, and I'll emphasize the part that he emphasizes and yanks out, and pulls out of context. It makes people feel good. It strokes them. The only reason people do this is so they can get something from you. That's why a car salesman says, you're great, buddy. You're my pal. You got the most beautiful wife, and she's looks like a whatever. And boy, I love that car you've got. It's a real classic. It's a 98 Chevy with dented fenders in it or something. You can't believe people that are stroking. And he used this verse here in verse 26. But he doesn't read this part right here. And God said, if thou wilt diligently hearken to the voice of the Lord thy God. This is a condition from God. And wilt do that which is right in his sight, and will give ear to his commandments, and keep all his statutes. And then Benny Hinn yanks this next sentence out and emphasizes it and says, I will put none of these diseases on thee. And that's all he says in the verse. God don't want these diseases on you. What do you mean he won't put none of these diseases? Read the rest of the verse. What does he say? Which I have brought upon the Egyptians. He said, he's not saying I won't put any disease on you, because he says in the 28th chapter of Deuteronomy, if you're not obedient to me, I'll bring pestilence, I'll bring famine, I'll bring disease, I'll bring you won't have any rain, you won't have any food, I'll empty your storehouses, you'll have nothing, you'll be sick and you'll be dying. There's a condition in this. But what are the diseases he brought on Egypt? Leukemia? No. Frogs? Water to blood? Gnats? Flies? Darkness? Death of the firstborn? It's outrageous what they do with the Bible. And they do it to twist it to make people feel good. You're a winner. Don't listen to that stuff. It's a twisting of the Word of God. It's a twisting of the Baptists. It's a twisting of the Pentecostals. It's a twisting. They get the word tongue, and then they don't even know that it has two words have been translated during the King James era because they use the word tongue instead of language. Glossa and dialectos. And they twist that and wrench it and say, they spoke with other tongues as the Spirit gave them utterance. And they think utterance is guttural sounds. La, 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 la. Apophthegma is the word. It has an exact meaning to speak clearly so you can be understood. Other tongue, heteroglossa. Other foreign languages. How hear we ever man on dialect when we were born? The dialect of the Koine. They don't even care. That's what it means. And when you try to explain it to, I know what I feel. I know what I believe. I'm emotional. My preacher said I'd have it. If I'd get it, and I'm going to, and I'll, la, 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 la. Sound like a bunch of, like those Indians, you know. It's just, it sounds like a bunch of babbling children playing in a sandbox. It's ridiculous. The entire nation is being deceived on every hand. It's everywhere. I saw a special one night, and they were talking about how hospitals were padding bills. And they had one guy on his, if he hadn't checked the bill that was sent to his insurance company, he was being charged for like 12 treatments a day of some particular treatment in a hospital. They didn't have to have but one every so many days. But they were charging him right and left on there because they were getting money from the hospital. And there's crookedness going on everywhere. It's because men want money and power, and they'll stroke and they'll do whatever they have to do to get it. You say, Jim, you're awful negative. Me and Dave will go out in public sometimes. I said, Dave, when I walk out here, I don't care if it's a little checkout girl at the checkout counter at Publix or Kroger's. I don't care if it's down here at the drugstore. I say, she's an out-and-out sinner. If God will withhold his restraining hand from her, she'll do the wickedest things before she's dead. That's every man. At his best state, it's altogether vanity. That means little old grandmothers, little sweet-looking little girls. Some of them do grow up and end up being prostitutes on drugs and dying that way. They were real sweet when they started. I got a niece that she ended up just the sweetest little girl she could be. Ended up living with a drug dealer. She said she was in shootouts with the police, loading guns in the back seat for her boyfriend while he's shooting at the cops. And she played the piano in church. She's the sweetest little girl, and she just loved Jesus with all her heart. Said she had something like 7 miscarriages, trying to have babies out of wedlock. And she was the sweetest girl you could find. Whew. I hope that God has dealt with her heart, because I really did love her as my niece. We're living in a world that's polluted and corrupted by twisting everything. I don't believe you can go anywhere where people are not twisting. If you work for a company, you know your bosses twist, don't they? If you admit it to yourself and own up to it, they do. In every facet of our life, I don't trust. You say, Jim, if you don't trust people that much, won't you just withhold yourself? You can't do that as a Christian. You got to lay your heart right out there and let people walk on it if they want to. You got to love your neighbor. You got to reach out for people. But I tell Dave, this will really help you if you'll learn this. Learn to believe the Bible concerning man's humanity. If the Bible says there's none good, believe it. If it says there's none righteous, believe it. If it says all men drink iniquity like water, believe it. All the little girls, all the little boys, all the grown people, all the old people. And outside of Christ, man has no righteousness whatsoever if he doesn't have the truth in his heart. He has no conscience and no righteousness. I don't care who it is. If it's your mother, don't care how sweet she is. There's no righteousness there. If you can learn that, learn to believe the Bible, you won't be disappointed when somebody does you wrong. You'll say they're supposed to do that. And you know what? You'll get less angry. Well, I guess I'll have to watch out for them next time. That really prepares you to live life. It's when you think they're good, that's when you get mad. That good person did me wrong. They're not good. All our righteousnesses are as filthy rags. Believe it, it's true. If a man doesn't have truth written in his heart, he'll do the dirtiest deeds. Or a woman, or a girl, or an old grandmother. People are wicked. Their nature's wicked without Christ in their hearts. You say, you're sure negative. No, I believe this book. I believe it when it says it. The only thing we can love in each other is Christ in one another. That's all we can love. And it will come out, and we'll see through all that outer man. When I get around somebody and they got a lot of outer man exhibiting himself, and they're a Christian, I try to reach through and get to the inner man and kind of help pull him out. I don't try to condemn him. I've had people here kind of lose their temper around me, and I just kind of easy and kind of try to reach inside and pull that inner man out so I can love that one. And when you do that, they realize that outer man has to die. Now, let's go on to something else. I'm going to continue this study. We're talking about perverseness. I want us to go back where we were last week, where I left off. Go back over here to Matthew 17 and 17. Matthew 17. Let me give you one other thing. I've given it to you before on my way over there. But look back at Zechariah. Now, these are Pentecostal verses that they use in the Pentecostal movement. Now, this is a Pentecostal... It's not a Pentecostal verse. It's a verse used by Pentecostals and Charismatics, and I call it on one of my DVDs. This is in the 4th chapter of Zechariah, and I call that DVD the Whoopee Gospel, because it's all about whoopee, you know. I got Jesus. I'm sorry, but that's not Jesus. That's some silly emotional move, and you can get that at a rock and roll concert. Now look here in Zechariah, the 4th chapter. They pull this verse out right here. This is the twisting they do. They quote the last sentence of verse 6, and that's all they quote. And this is what they do. Not by might, not by power, but by my Spirit, saith the Lord. Whoa, yeah, praise God. And they say that as though they've got some magic formula for overcoming the world. That ain't got nothing to do with anything they're talking about. Nothing. Let me explain to you. Zechariah. Zechariah and Haggai, you meet these guys over in the 5th chapter of Ezra the first time. Hold your place there and look at Ezra. Ezra, 5th chapter. Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther, Job. Ezra. All right. Well, I'm in Nehemiah. I won't ever find that in Nehemiah, will I? No, sure won't. All right. Here's where you find Zechariah and Haggai. They prophesied, both of them. They began to prophesy in 520 BC. Haggai prophesied for 3 months. Zechariah prophesied immediately following on the heels of Haggai, prophesied for 2 years. And they were prophesying to Israel concerning going back and starting rebuilding the temple. Look at verse 1, chapter 5. Then the prophets Haggai the prophet and Zechariah the son of Iddo prophesied unto the Jews that were in Judah and Jerusalem in the name of the God of Israel, even unto them. Now here's what they prophesied. Now, in order to answer, not by might nor by power, but by my Spirit, saith the Lord, you have to know the time element of history. Israel has been carried away because of 500 years of apostasy. They're going after Baal Grove, Shemash, Molech, etc. Baal Grove, the sun and the tree god. And they're over here in Babylon. They've been carried from Israel over here, from here over to Babylon. They're in captivity. They're in captivity. Now I'm answering not by might nor by power, but by my Spirit, saith the Lord. I'm going to tell you that's not a Pentecostal, charismatic, jumping up and down verse to make you feel good. It's about history of Israel being in captivity, and when are they going to be released from captivity? That's what it's about. Well, they get over here to Babylon. That's in 586, they're carried over there. And then Persia overthrows Babylon in 539 BC. Nebuchadnezzar, when he took Israel away, destroyed their temple, destroyed Jerusalem, just burned it to the ground, plowed it up, pulled all the stones down. And they're in captivity over here in Babylon. But do you think the Pentecostals is going to try to find this out? The Charismatics? No. And in 538, the Spirit of the Lord comes upon the new king of Persia, and his name is Cyrus. The Spirit, notice this, the Spirit of the Lord comes upon Cyrus and moves him to tell Israel in 538, he gives them a decree to go back to Israel and rebuild their temple. And then when he is deposed from the throne, then in he gives them the command. 536 BC, Israel catches so much flack from a man named Tatnai. And Tatnai, I'm answering not by might nor by power, but by my Spirit, saith the Lord. And Tatnai tells Israel, here they are, they've come from over here in Babylon. The Persian Empire keeps their capital city as Babylon, and they come back over here to Israel to rebuild the temple. They start rebuilding the temple, and Haggai and Zechariah are over here in the land of what we call Israel. It was the land of Canaan back then. But they're over there, or it's actually Israel then, excuse me. It's actually Israel. And Haggai and Zechariah are there with the people when they quit building. And they quit building in 536. They build for 2 years. They catch so much flack from this Tatnai. He says, I'm going to write to the king. I'm going to write to the king. And Tatnai is what you call a satrap. A satrap is a representative for the Persian king to collect taxes and so forth over here and to kind of run the show as a governor over here in Israel. And Tatnai says, I'm going to write to the king over here and tell on you, y'all are building this temple and you're an evil city. So they quit building right here. Then in 520 BC, for 16 years they're not building. Remember, they're in captivity. And they're slaves and they're having to do what they're told to do. Well, Haggai and Zechariah rise up in 520. Haggai first, he preaches for 3 months. And then Zechariah, he preaches for 2 years. And they are telling the people to get busy rebuilding the temple. And this is the time factor of Zechariah 4. And through here, he's talking about how is Israel going to be delivered from Babylon to go back to Israel and rebuild their temple and Jerusalem. How's that going to happen when they're under such a mighty empire, imperial authority as the Persians? How's that going to happen? And Nehemiah says, and Zechariah says, it will not be by might, it will not be by a great army, because Israel don't have a great army. They're subject to the captivity of Persia. It will not be by some great power of Israel or some king that comes along to deliver them. It will not be by might, by some tremendous military force, or by power, but it'll be by the Spirit of God that goes to Cyrus, goes to Darius in 520, that goes to Artaxerxes, and in 457 BC, and goes to Artaxerxes in 444 and gives Nehemiah letters to go back and rebuild Jerusalem. It'll not be by a mighty army or any kind of a power. It'll be by the Spirit of God as he goes to these kings and causes them to give decrees in the 70 weeks of Daniel to cause Israel to go back and rebuild. That's what that's talking about. It's not talking about, not by power. Whoa, yeah. Gosh, somebody shut that guy up. Y'all ever heard that? You've heard that. It's total ridiculousness, but they don't know nothing about Israel's history, so they yank a verse out and go, wrench, twist, like squeezing a lemon. Does that make me angry? It's a false hope. It's false doctrine. It's false assurance. You're going to win, not by might, nor by power. Whoopee! That is a pretty famous Pentecostal charismatic verse. I know Greg's heard it. Have any of y'all heard that? Whew. They say it all the time. And they jump and kick their heels together. It looks like some dancer on a stage. Whoopee! I can't do that. Not at my age. All right. I'm just showing you how men pervert the Word of God. You can't even explain not by might nor by power unless you explain the history of it. Good night. I can't believe these people. They've got another favorite verse. I'm giving you favorite verses. None of these diseases. No weapon formed against you will prosper. You'll hear all these verses in one message a dozen times in charismatic meetings. Not by might nor by power, but by my Spirit. Yeah, whoa! They jump up and down and run when they say that. And they got one of them. These are probably three of the most common favorite verses of charismatics. It's over in 1 John 4. I didn't mean to do these. I haven't shown these in a long time. These are four favorite verses above everything they say. Probably the most common four favorite verses to excite people into some ecstasy, ecstatic state of mind. And when they say, not by might, not by power, the organ's going, bah, 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 bah. Whoa, and people go, whoa, whoa. Gosh, it makes me excited to do that. It makes me tired, too. Have you seen them do that? That's what they do. It's outrageous. Those of us that have seen it and heard it, it's as common as a fly buzzing around your head. In a Pentecostal, they'll say these verses over and over and over and over and whoopee and jump and run, and the keyboard man going ding 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 ding. The organ whop whop whop, like they do in a lot of the black churches. And they quote these verses. It has nothing to do with it. nothing to do with what they're talking about. It's disgusting when they do it. Look at 1 John 4. This is the other favorite verse. Oral Roberts said this constantly. He's probably dead in hell now. He's a false teacher. People said he died. I said, good. One less false teacher to deal with. One less liar. All right. Now, 1 John 4. Now, Oral Roberts said this about 6 or 8 times every time you'd see him. It was constant. And it'd do the same thing with this as it do with not by might nor by power. No weapon formed against you will prosper. The weapon won't prosper, but it'll do the work that God causes to do on you, and it won't prosper because once God uses it to break Israel, then he'll break the weapon. And they use this verse here. The last sentence, it's a independent clause, so we'll read it as a sentence. The last sentence of verse 4. Greater is he that's in you than he's in the world. Whoa! And that's the way they do it. Whoopee! See, he's great in you, and you can win, and you're a winner. And all these are winners' verses. Except that's not what they're about. What this is about confessing Christ. You got to start with the first verse. Beloved, believe not every spirit, but try the spirits, whether they are of God. One fellow said, what do? Just try it on for size and see if it works? I said, no. Try is the word dokimazo. Dokimazo is a word that means to put in the fire or to test. To test. When you place the alpha in front of dokimazo, it's the negative particle. It negates the word, gives you an opposite meaning, and that is the word reprobate. Reprobate silver was a silver that the Jews said they had not put into a furnace and turned the heat up and burn out all the impurities. And it was worthless. If you dig gold ore out of the ground, it's no good unless you put it in the fire. Turn it up, keep heating it up till all the impurities burn out. The nickel and the zinc and the copper and everything burns out. Even the silver will burn out, and nothing's left but pure gold. And when something scorches, it burns. There's a scorching to it. Gold will not scorch. That's what the metallurgists, people that work in metallurgy, or the metal people that work in metals, it won't scorch. Just keep heating gold, and it gets pure where you can pour it. And that's when it can conform to the likeness of Christ, or the image. When we are purified in the fire, then we'll take on the image of Christ and we become pure. And that is the word holy. It means to be single. Hagios, singular, pure. Now, try the spirits, put them in the fire, and see if they're real. Try the spirits, whether they be of God, because many false prophets are going out into the world. Find out if it's a false spirit or if it's the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is truth. Put it up against the backdrop of Scripture. Whenever a man is preaching, find out if he can weigh out in Scripture. And if he can't, it's false. Put it up against the Scriptures as your screen and say, that's wrong. And here's how you know the Spirit of God. Hereby know you the Spirit of God. Every spirit, here's how you know God's Spirit in a man. And here's how, and the next sentence tells you how. You have to go into all of this to say, greater is he that's in you than he's in the world. Every spirit that confesseth that Jesus is Christ is come in the flesh is of God. Well, that sounds like anybody who says that Jesus came in a physical body is of God. Well, the Buddhists know Jesus came in a physical body. Are they of God? The Muslims know he came in a physical body. Are they of God? The Baptists know they came in a physical body. And if they believe and accept Christ and don't believe in predestination, are they of God? The Roman Catholics believe you got to eat Jesus, and they say, hey, he came in the flesh. Are they of God? No. Not if they believe those doctrines they say. What does this mean, every spirit? Here's how you know the Spirit of Christ. Every spirit that confesseth doesn't mean just to say he came in the flesh. That's the word homologeo. Homologeo comes from homo. That's a Greek word, homo, of the same. A homosexuals of the same sex. Homo logos. Logos is the word. Homo means the same. Confess means the same word. It means to agree with. So if there's a spirit in a man, and he confesses Christ, not walk down the aisle and, I want to confess Jesus as my personal Savior. I've seen that 1,000 times. Have you? Now, I know Dave hasn't. But in those Baptist revival meetings, begging them down the aisle, how you walk down there, the preacher takes you by the neck, I want to confess Jesus. Well, that's not confessing. Confess means to agree with, and you agree with him every day. You go out in public, you tell people Christmas is pagan. God doesn't love everybody. You have to be hated by the world. Death to self, daily cross. If you don't bear your cross, you can't be my disciple. That's what Jesus said. That's confessing Christ, and that's daily. But Paul put it this way. Paul said, some men profess they know God in Titus 1:16. That word profess, why they translated it profess instead of confess, it's the same word. Some men profess that they know God, but in works they deny him. Works they deny. It's what a man does that actually confesses Christ, that agrees with him. If you say the words and you live the life and do the truth, he that doeth the truth cometh to the light. He said if you can confess homologeo, but not do these things, he said you're denying or naomai. It's the same, that he's saying the same thing in Titus 1:16 as he's saying in 1 Corinthians 8:1. He said in 1 Corinthians 8:1, he says, knowledge puffs up. Just to have knowledge is not enough. He said some men profess that they know God. They say it with the lips and they got it in their mind. They say they know God. Knowledge, just having knowledge, P-H-U-S-I-O-O, puffs up, makes you conceited and lifted up. Look at what I know. Blah, 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 blah. Prosukomai. See, I know the word prayer. See, proskuneo. See, I know that. I know Greek words. See? Sozo. How's that? You like that? Saved. That don't mean anything if you're not doing it. He said, knowledge gives you the big head, but charity edifies, builds up the house of God, and we are God's house. Charity is agape, and agape is walking in the commandments of God. This is agape, this is love, that we walk after his commandments. If you walk in the commandments of God, you have to, number one, know the commandments, and you have to do them. So knowing and doing is what edifies, not just knowing. That gives you the big head just to walk around saying, listen to my Greek words, and you won't live right. We've had people come here, spew out Greek words while they're here, walk out the door, go around their family, drink, cuss, smoke. Their words are worthless. These people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me, Jesus said. Quoted Isaiah, the 29th chapter. So that's the same thing as some men profess that they know God, but in works they deny him. if you deny or contradict God's word and say, I don't believe in predestination, I don't believe I have to give up Christmas, I don't believe that prayer means to bow to the will of God, then you are Antichrist in 1 John 2:22. Now, let's get back over here. Here's how you know the Spirit of God. Every spirit that's in a man that confesses Christ is come in the flesh. Every spirit that's in a man that agrees with God's words in his flesh, causing him obey God. This is not talking about everybody that says with the mouth that Jesus came in a fleshly body. It's talking about every spirit that's in you that's obedient to God. That's the truth. That's the Spirit of God. That's what he's saying. And then he goes on to say, do you understand what we just said? I haven't taken this much time on this. Then he says, every spirit that confesseth not does not agree with Christ. He denies Christ in his words. If you confess Christ, you're going to agree with everything he said. Predestination, death to self, daily cross, self-denial. Every spirit in you that confesses or that agrees with God in obedience to his word, that's of God. That's what he's saying here. And every spirit that confesseth not that Jesus Christ is come in the flesh is not of God, and this is the spirit of Antichrist that denies Christ, and that's what he said in 1 John 2:22. He that denieth Christ is Antichrist, the one who contradicts the word of God. You'll either contradict God or you'll confess Christ. And then he says, whereof ye have heard that it should come, even is now already in the world. Ye are of God, little children, and have overcome them, because greater is the Spirit of God that is in you than self that's in the world. That's what he's saying. When he says, he that confesseth that Christ is come in the flesh, he's saying the man that confesses that Christ is come in your flesh, not Christ came in a fleshly body. Did you see that? Because if it meant everyone that can say with your mouth that Jesus came in a fleshly body and lived on the earth, that means just about everybody in the world is going to heaven, doesn't it? That's not what it's talking about. So when it says, greater is he that's in you than he's in the world, it's not, whoopee, greater is he that's in you. Let's run up down and go, whoopee. That's about confessing Christ, that verse. It's not a Pentecostal charismatic verse to be yanked out of context and made a mockery of. These 4 verses I just gave you, Charismatics make me sick, wrenching the Word of God and twisting it all to pieces. I despise people who do that. Am I about out of time? I feel like I've just got started tonight. I'm going to stay on this subject of people twisting. I'm going to read more about mind control. I'm going to read more about... I believe Americans need to know the truth about American history. Mr. Schenkman's got a book called Presidential Ambition. Whew. He lays the presidents low, not just this century and last century, but the century before. He lays them out. He said he kind of favored George Washington. He was being a little prejudiced and partial. Of course, he wasn't talking from a Christian viewpoint, so I don't care what he does. But he tells the truth about Washington. And people need to know the truth about the Bible, the truth about these verses. You cannot take a verse, yank it out, and bounce it around the room and let it mean whatever it wants to mean. It has a meaning. You know how that infuriates me to see people do that kind of stuff? I'm appalled. Probably one that's not so popular is over there in the 4th chapter of Romans. It's popular, but not like these are more or less... These are identifying verses to a charismatic. When they quote one of those in Exodus 15 or Isaiah 54 or Zechariah the 4th chapter, not by might nor by power, or they quote none of these diseases, or they'll quote, no weapon formed against you will prosper. If you watch Charismatic TV, the Devil's Broadcasting Network, you'll hear it all the time, popping it. It's like this is their mainstay verses for pumping people up. It's like, let's prime the pump. And you yell whoopee and get the drummer to go bang, bang as they're doing it. It's just an emotional idiocy. And I hate to see, I'll tell you what makes me mad is somebody take the word of the God that I serve and do that. And it ought to make everybody angry. Pull something out and they know nothing about the context, know nothing about the history. They're just screaming and yelling and running up and down an aisle. Somebody will slap that guy and make him sit down and behave himself. Just sit down and shut up. Say, boy, you're sure hard. You wrenched the Word of God. I love this book. Don't you wrench this in front of me. I'd call a man down in public for doing that. If he shouted, not by might, not by power, by my Spirit, saith the Lord, I'd say, shut up. I would say that to one of them if they'd do it out in public. But isn't it funny? They can only do it in church. They can't do it in public. If they're speaking in tongues, why can't they speak in tongues down here at Kroger's? And have the cashier interpret? And the cashiers go, yea, I say unto thee, I will be thy people. Thou shalt be my people. I will be thy God. They start paraphrasing psalmist-sounding words, you know. And some guy's wallowing on the floor, spinning around in a circle, like Curly, you know, whoop, 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 go around. And I've seen them do that. I've seen them do it without the whoop, whoop, whoop.
Jim, what verse is that in Romans 4?
Well, over in Romans 4, he's talking about calling things that be not as though they were, and it's talking about raising Isaac from the dead loins of his father. Something that was not was something that was dead. And they just yank that out. They don't even read the whole text. They don't even read the whole text where it says, God quickens the dead and calls things that be not, and something that was not was something that was dead. Rachel mourned over her children because they were not, because Herod had slaughtered them. And God called Isaac that was not. Out of the dead loins of his father and the dead womb of his mother. He goes on in verse 18 and says, Abraham, who against hope believed in hope. Abraham had no hope. He was 99 years old when God said you're going to have a son. And he didn't have any sperm anymore. And Sarah had no egg in her womb anymore. She quit ovulating years before. She was 89. That he might become the father of many nations, according to that which was spoken, so shall thy seed Isaac be. And God named him before he was even conceived. And they couldn't have a son, but they did. And then he says, and being not weak in faith, Abraham being not weak in faith, he considered not his own body now dead. Not a physical dead body, but the loins of his body, his genitalia, couldn't have children. He had no seed, no sperm. Now that's faith. When he was about 100 years old, neither the deadness of Sarah's womb. He staggered not through unbelief. It's talking about Isaac being raised from the dead. Dead loins of his father. Isaac was a picture of Christ resurrected from the dead. I mean, I just despise these people that take the word of God and they'll say, call things that be not as though they were, just say it with your mouth and you get it. Whoopee, a Cadillac, 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 come on, Cadillac. And I got it. It'll be on the parking lot. You guys are idiots, you know it? I'm looking at the camera. You're dumbbells. You say, you shouldn't talk to people like, yes, I should. Maybe I could say like Elijah did, perhaps your God is asleep. Yell a little louder. Maybe he is on a journey. You think Elijah wasn't a smart aleck to those priests of Baal, and they're screaming, jumping up and down on an altar, cutting their bodies and bleeding all over the place? He said, you look like fools. When I hear them say these things about these verses, they look like fools. Well, they are fools. And you know what? God said the deceived and the deceiver is mine, and I have led them into this deception so I can put them in hell. Let's pray. Father, thank you for your word. God, help us to continue this work. I pray for the sheep that they'll be strong, that they'll make an effort to be strong in the Word. Lord, I'm so tired of a world that don't believe you. They call themselves Christians. Lord, I pray you'll open up doors for this ministry, open them wide open. Lord, I'll stand on the courthouse steps in Washington and tell people the truth if you give me the opportunity. I've never been so tired of this life. Give us strength to continue as long as we're here. Let us stay for many years for the church, for the sake of the church. We'll praise you for all things, glorify you. Open up the doors, Lord. Open up according to your mercy. Supply every need that we have, and we'll praise you for it all in Christ's name. Amen. That's the best I can explain that. Unless I spend 2 or 3 more hours on it.
I've been to Pentecostal church maybe a couple of times. Been down there.
They're crazy as bed bugs. Huh?
I've been down there to faith is invited me, but it is scary.
Huh?
It was kind of scary.
Oh, it ain't scary. They're just fools.
They were running around the whole room to the church. The preacher told everybody, run. They were all running in one line around the whole church.
Somebody
And I
should
was
say,
like,
you should have said, what for? That might be spiritual, run around the church.
but this morning, when you read the scripture about smoking, we did that in the Catholic Church. They read certain passages, smoke your breath in the Catholic Church.
Yeah. Well,
So all this stuff.
that's ritual.
Yeah.
But the publican really felt that. Oh man, he was so repentant.
Well, I didn't really understand when I was there why they did it, but I guess that's where they got that from.
Yeah. This whole nation is twisted everywhere. Better be careful. I mean, it don't matter where you go, it's all a perversion.
Okay.
If you have to be around those Pentecostals here and shout those verses. It's disgusting. They shout and scream and jump up and down and stomp their feet and jump and lift their heels together. Say those verses like it's some miraculous mantra.
Oral Roberts, I used to watch him make when I was a child, and I remember him saying
He was stupid. Those people are the biggest idiots I've ever heard in my life. They're just idiots. I mean, you think that somebody that's crazy can be dangerous to the public.
Let's see,
I look at him.
I was in awe of him. He was set up high.
Yeah.
But it was, my mom had this numbness in her head. She said I was prayer. I was in awe of the prayer when it came.
Some guy's back there in the back there. Hey, give me some more of them. Give me them scissors. Quick. Here, give me some quarters. Give me some olive oil. Okay. Back that enough. Here's another. Here.
And couch transport, and potatoes.
It's to watch. I mean, I get so curious. See, I love the Word of God. If you twist the Word that I love, that makes me happy. I don't care who it is. God's Word. That the words have a meaning. It's just like you're not even going to understand, not by night or by night, unless you know that Zacharias going into captivity, and how we want to be released is going to be the Spirit of the Lord going to Cyrus, going to Christ, going to the church. Long it makes you feel good. That's what.
I mean, the song lyrics and stuff, the gospel songs.
Yeah.
Greater.
Yeah.
That's all in the song.
But they write it, but they don't have the foggiest idea what it's about.
Much.
Because they don't know nothing about history. They don't know nothing about confessing. He will.
I died for truth.
I love
of
you.
being exposed.
I'm glad
Being
you get home.
fortunate to be exposed to.
I'm glad you're here. Glad you're here, David. Tell him just go down and order it and book some in.
They
They could put some in Barnes and Noble. Then go Barnes and Noble. They'll order it for 'em. If they don't have it, they may have it on the shelf. To me, it's great. I love it.
You're driving, I'll drive.
These crazy insane Pentecostal charismatics, they're nuts.
Yep, I've been to some of them churches. That one over there, where the big tree is.
You've heard them say these things, haven't you?
Oh, yeah. Greatest heathen in the world will be. The craziest thing I ever heard them say was, money is the root of all evil, so get it out of your wallets and bring it up here. That's what they said. They put the love. They put that out the love.
See, I didn't never learn the small case, I only learned the large, small case. Okay.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, but I did that. Invited me to church, I didn't know what we were. Right here. Christ, Presbyterian, yeah, that's why I went today. They got a school out there called CPA. I think that's the one of the biggest churches in Greenville.
He didn't say nothing.
After church, I talked to him. I said, I started talking about Christmas, how pagan it was. I said, he talking the whole time. He had just graduated from seminary school. He got his PhD and all that good stuff. I said, you gotta be ignorant, because anytime somebody brag about, the master description,
You broke the can?
Yes, I did. So we talking about Christmas. He said, he was looking at me real strange. He said, I know what you're saying, but I still feel like we could celebrate. I said, read Jeremiah 10th chapter.
Yeah, I guess I
I
can.
read it before. He kept looking at me and said, and then another one is, members came up, because I was talking, they were listening to me talk about Christmas. He said, where you from?